Good morning. Okay. I hope so. Good morning. It is always an honor to stand before you. And if you'd indulge me for just a minute, I know we all have Father Bob stories pretty much. I just want to tell mine, if I could. My wife and I came for her back to St. Mark's a few years ago after having been away and moved away. And I was getting used to fitting in as a member of the congregation. Father Bob was the interim priest at the time. I didn't even know that he knew who I was or knew anything about me. But one day at the end of worship, as he was coming down the aisle at the end, he stopped and turned to me and said, "So when are you going to preach?" Doesn't that sound like him? And I said, "Huh?" He said, "You're a preacher, right?" I said, "Well, I'm a chaplain now." He says, "You've been a preacher. Once a preacher, always a preacher. When are you going to preach here?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I guess we could talk about it." We did, and next thing I knew, I was plugged in as a preacher. So Father Bob is in my heart and on my mind today as I stand before you, as is my father on Father's Day. He was someone who calmed many storms for me and taught me the faith that would bring down many giants that stood in my way. So they're both very much with me today. So I want to get into our gospel story as we start, the very familiar story of Jesus calming the waves, calming the storm. Very familiar. It's part of our culture almost. It's see it in a lot of artwork, stained glass windows, stories. Jesus' hands up in the air, calming the storm, while the frightened disciples around him look in awe and wonder, who is this person with power over the elements? It's a story that has a lot to it, but I want to pick out a part that gets kind of overlooked and passed over. At the very beginning, Jesus says, "Let us go across to the other side." The other side. What's the other side? The other side of what? What's the other side of the Sea of Galilee? Or the Lake Tiberias it is, or it's gone by many names, but it's that big body of water in Israel. And on the side that Jesus has been and has just recently been teaching the parables and all to the Jews, he now says, let's go to the other side. The other side is Gentile territory. The other side is where the Gerasenes are that he's planning on going to. And we will see if we read into the next part of Mark, and also the same in Matthew and Luke. They pretty much word for word have this story and the one that follows it word for word as Mark does. I think they cut and pasted it into their Gospels. We see he goes to this very strange place and encounters very strange things, including the Gerasene demoniac, this big, giant, mad, hairy, powerful person that no one can control, and all kinds of strange things happen. It's a place that, well, a good Jew would not want to be. It's an unclean place. There's pigs all over flying. It's just not a safe place, not a good place. It's the other side. It's really the other side. We know about other sides, don't we? We have other sides in our lives, that place we don't want to go, that place, that neighborhood, that area, those people, whatever, that they're just not like us. Too much unknown about them. They don't look like us or act like us or think or live or vote like us. They're the ones on the other side. Different values, strange culture, seemingly dangerous. So you want to avoid, you want to go around. You want to stay away. Stay safely in your own side. I mentioned my dad a bit ago. His father lived in Brooklyn Heights, and we lived in the nice, white, middle-class town of Pequannock. And when we visited my grandfather, we would go through the tunnel and around the highway and over the Brooklyn Bridge and right to his very nice apartment in a nice area. But oftentimes, or once in a while, when we came back, my father wouldn't get in the highway. He would cut across lower Manhattan. And he would go down by the Bowery to those areas. And he would drive slowly. So my sister and I could see this other side of life. We could see these men in doorways and gutters, stumbling down streets and living their lives in bottles. We could see people different from us. And we saw them. They were human beings. And he didn't comment, he didn't lecture, he didn't preach. He just showed us. Maybe he showed us so that we wouldn't become like them, hopefully, or maybe he showed us so that we would see that they are humans and have compassion. Whatever it was, I think both worked. It was an exposure to the other side of life we wouldn't have seen, and just seeing it and knowing it was an important lesson for me. I think the trip on the boat with Jesus was all about exposing his disciples to this other side over there, this other side of the Gentiles, the Gerasenes. The disciples knew what they were heading toward. They had to be extremely hesitant, to say the least, but Jesus was not hesitant. Jesus knew his ministry was going to have to be to all. And eventually it would go to the Gentiles. It would go to these strange places. It would go to the other sides. But then a different kind of fear event happens on the way. The big storm, an immediate fear of dying and death grips them. These men, some of them fishermen, used to being out on the water like that. They're scared to death. They're gripped by fear and agonizing panic. What a stark contrast. In the back of the boat, there's Jesus. He found himself a nice little cushion, and he's taking a nap. I don't know how he could take a nap with all that going on, but Jesus, I think maybe he's the coolest customer ever, I don't know if they had sunglasses back then, but man, I picture him wearing shades and just chill, total chill, man. This guy, yeah, Jesus, he's taking a nap. And they're worried about dying. They're panicking. They're running around with their hair on fire. And Jesus is napping. Just get a picture of that contrast. No worry, no panic, no fear. The Bible tells us the difference between Jesus and his disciples can be measured by the quality of their faith. Not only do they believe that they're doomed, but they think that Jesus doesn't care. Their logic and reason tell them that they're being destroyed. And it tells them that God is absent. They're in danger and they don't see any evidence that God can or will do anything for them. Jesus points out that the root of fear is lack of faith, lack of belief in God's power, God's love, and God's presence. Yeah, you can trust your own resources. You can trust your own powers of reason and logic in these situations, and you'll end up in panic. Or you can trust that there is a greater power than the one that you think is threatening you. I think Jesus needed to teach that lesson before he got to that other side. All right, let's step out of that story for a moment and go over to the Old Testament. David and Goliath. The Israelites lined up on one side for battle, fighting for their nation, the existence of their nation, against the mighty army of the Philistines on the other side. And on that other side with the Philistines is this giant, this extremely formidable, powerful person, warrior, who is devoted to destroying them. And maybe to spare a big bloody battle, he says, if any one of you can come and defeat me, that's it, battle's over, we surrender. But if I kill that one, battle's over that way. We take over you. Well, the Israelite soldiers and leaders looked at him, and their reason and their logic told him that none of them was big enough, none of them was strong enough, none of them was well equipped enough or brave enough to face this guy. But little David had no use for that kind of reason or logic. God had equipped him in the past, taking care of the sheep, overcoming wild beasts. So calmly and confidently, armed only with faith and a sling, we know what happened. Oh. Joanna Adams, a Presbyterian pastor and theologian, said that faith is not the absence of fear, but the courage to walk through the fear and take the hand that is offered you. I think that's an important thing to remember. Fear and faith are obviously very central to both of these stories. And fear is a very common theme throughout the Bible. Whether God or Jesus or angels, you often hear them saying, "Fear not, do not be afraid." Can we believe that? Can we have faith in what we can't see? It doesn't make sense. I know it's easier said than done. There's a lot to be afraid of. There's a lot in our lives, there's a lot in our world that threatens us greatly. It's not just what's on the other side or who's on the other side, but there are diseases that can take our lives or those of whom we love. There are environmental threats. What's going on with the heat and the weather and the earth? I was thinking about just over the past couple of decades since the change of millennia, century. Remember when Y2K was going to wreak havoc and bring everything down, destroy everything? And on the heels of that, we had 9/11, we had anthrax threats, we still had AIDS. We had West Nile, SARS, E. coli, swine flu, Ebola, Zika, and now the big one, COVID-19. We've all done a lot of damage, taken a lot of lives. We're still here, though. The economy collapsed in 2008. The Mayan calendar said the world was going to end in 2012. We've had ISIS, North Korea, Russia, China, domestic terrorism, racial injustice and brutality. And in each of our individual lives, plenty of storms. Storms come up and threaten and devastate us. We know that the wind is strong and that the waves are coming aboard. We know that our boats are fragile and we feel totally vulnerable. Sometimes we just can't see God. Where is God? What's God doing? Is God asleep? Is God unwilling, or worse, unable to do anything for us? How come God isn't at least panicking with us? Quote Joanna Adams again, "It may be difficult to understand or believe, But in the times that threaten us the most, God is with us. God enters into the depth of our need. That is a reality that only faith can know. Can we believe it? That at the lowest and darkest and most threatening times in our lives, there is indeed a divine presence in our little boat with us. Not anxious, not panicking. Because not only does God wield the ultimate power in this universe, but God knows the big picture. And as he said to the Israelites in the book of Jeremiah, I know the plans I have for you, plans for your welfare and not harm. That powerful presence is with us. It's here for us. It is faith that connects us to it, and it is fear that separates us from it. To God be all glory now and forever.